Welcome to me, where suspenseful, thrilling, and mysterious stories will draw you into a world where the lines between reality and fantasy seem to blur. When the night falls, when all the sounds gradually quiet down, leaving only your own heartbeat and breathing, that's when these stories begin. Tensions, unsolved mysteries, moments that will make you hold your breath in fear or curiosity, all are waiting for you ahead. Find a comfortable seat, dim the lights, and let this sound guide you on a journey that is not for the faint of heart. I want each of you to leave a comment sharing where you are in the world. And if you are enjoying the episodes, don't forget to give a like and subscribe to the channel now. Relax. Are you ready? If so, join me in the first story right now. Under the Kitchen Sink. Spoiler, but a scare warning. MC and other characters talk about being knocked out and a near death from a spider bite. Very mild. Fictional story, but based on orthodox Christian spiritual warfare. It was a Saturday afternoon when I was 13. My friend Lila and I were playing hide-and-go-seek at her house. Lila was my new friend, but she was fun to hang out with. I also had a friend named Aiden. He was my best friend since I was little, like really little. He looks the same age as me, but he always acted a lot older. He was scared about me going places I shouldn't, and that I should be careful. But he said that a lot with Lila, because I never told my mom about me visiting her. But I thought, as long as I got back between the 2 hours, I got off school, and she got home from work, she would never find out. Lila counted while I tried to find a hiding spot in her big, empty house. My feet echoed as I ran around, and then I found a room under the stairs. I giggled as I closed the door and hid in between some old clothes, a vacuum, a laundry hamper, and the washing machine. 29:30, ready or not, here I come! Ain't no way she is going to find me here. I bet she's afraid of the I found you, she yelped as she opened the door. What? How did you find me? This had to have been the best hiding spot. Lila waved her hand and said, "That's not the best one. That one is quite easy to find." I got up and dusted my pants off. And as I walked out, I closed the creaky door. Then I asked her, "What is the best hiding spot?" Now, why would I tell you that? Because then you would know how to find me. But do you want to know? But the way she said it, it made me really want to know. Please, please, please tell me. I won't hide there. I just want to see it. Lila whipped her dark hair and tapped her finger to her chin. You may not want to hide there, but you will probably stay there for some time when you see it. I was confused, but it still made me want to go even more. Follow me, my friend, she said, reaching for my hand. We went past the front door of her house and through the entryway to her kitchen. I hopped on the white tiles as I followed her, and she let me go. Are you ready? She asked. Mm-hmm. I nodded excitedly. She then reached into the pocket of her black coat and pulled out an old key. Then she walked to the weirdest spot ever, her kitchen sink. She bent down to this big lock and fat chains and popped the key in and turned it like it was easy. Then she slowly opened the doors, but with a smile that was weirdly excited for me to see it. And once the doors are opened, I hear a loud whooshing sound and what looked like a big black hole. Whoa! How come I've never seen this before? Has anybody seen it before? Oh yeah, a lot of people have, but only people who choose to listen to me instead of, well, don't mind that. Go ahead and go inside. But where does it go? It won't hurt, will it? I don't want to do things that I know I shouldn't and get hurt. You'll be okay, you promise? Lila said. Look at all the fun games we play together behind your mom's back. Trust me, this is what you want. I felt scared, but I wanted to believe her. I took a few steps toward the sink, and the closer I got, the closer I felt like it was pulling me in, and it was harder to get away. Dee Dee, I heard a voice from above me. Huh? I look up and get a push back from the sink, and the doors slam closed on their own. Before I looked at the voice, I got a quick look at Lila, who quickly put down her foot like she was going to do something, but she didn't want me to see it. I turned around, and in the window above the sink, I saw Aiden looking at me. He had reddish-brown hair, and when the sun hit it, it looked like it was a bright fire. He said with a worried face, "Why are you here? I warned you not to come here." "Oh, we were just having a little fun. You'll get hurt." Before I could say anything, he looked over to Lila and said, "What are you doing?" "Exploring. Why do you have to ruin the fun?" He answered. "You are a stranger." "A stranger?" "Me and Dee Dee are best friends, better friends than you. Clearly, she makes more time for me than you. Besides, how long have you known her for?" "Since she was baptized." Lila seemed really mad at his answer. I didn't know what to say. I didn't want to hurt Aiden's feelings, but I really wanted to have fun. When I looked at Aiden again, he already looked like he was sad because of what she said. And I was scared that what she said was true. I didn't want it to be. I glance over to the big, old clock on the wall and realize that my mom would be home any minute. I look at them both and say, "I have to get home." Aiden told me, "Maybe you should tell your mom about this." I shook my head and said, "No, she would get so mad at me." Aiden didn't seem to like that I said that, but said, "Your choice. Dee Dee, your choice." Then he walked away from the window. I ran home as fast as I could. And thankfully, I got there just in time. I don't think my mom knew at all where I had been. I just acted normal, and we enjoyed dinner together. She even asked, "So how was school today, honey? I heard you had a hard time on the test." I knew I could have done better, but I felt so sleepy. And I think it was from not telling Mom about Lila and keeping it a secret made me tired and not think well. It was decimals, I told her. She put her fork down and said, "But you're so good at decimals." She looked confused and said, "Dee Dee, you seem to be having a hard time in school lately. Not just with the test, but with things you know, and know really well." I felt warm. I had to come up with something without telling my secret. "I've been doing extra homework, so I stay up late and get sleepy." She didn't seem to like that very much. "Listen, Dee Dee, I want you to be doing your homework when you get home from school, not late in the night. You need your sleep, and you should have plenty of time after school to do it, right?" The whole time she talked, I kept thinking about Lila's kitchen sink. What was under there? Where did it go? Was it really as bad as Aiden made it out to be? "Dee Dee, Dee Dee." My mom snapped me out of my thinking. "Look, hun, you need to finish up and go get some rest. Homework in the afternoon and sleep at night. That's all." I got on the bathroom stool to brush my teeth, and I went to say my prayers. As I did, I had a really bad feeling that I didn't usually have. I felt bad about how I treated Aiden earlier. I hoped he still wanted to be my friend. I turned the switch on my small blue lamp. And as I went to bed, I threw the covers over my head. My blonde hair got in my face as I curled up, confused about my day. Psst! I didn't think anything of it, and closed my eyes tightly. Psst! That time was too loud. I threw my blanket off to look around my room. Then I saw someone in the window again. But it wasn't Aiden. Lila stood on the roof outside my window and said, "Hey, you're up." "Lila? What are you doing here? It's past my bedtime." I began to speak in a whisper as I looked really quickly toward my cracked bedroom door. My mom might still be up. Bedtime, schmed time. It doesn't matter as long as you don't get caught. Don't you want to see that portal? But Aiden said not to. Lila rolled her eyes and said, "Aiden isn't saying that because he is worried. Aiden just doesn't want you to have any fun." "But come on. You don't want to be a scaredy cat, do you? You can do what you want. You wanted to see the hiding spot yourself. Remember?" With the last word, she said, her eyes lit up. But it wasn't in a good way. I really wanted to see what that black hole was. Maybe she was right. I can do what I want. We were back in her kitchen. She had led me out of my house by a rope she tied to the roof, and I had no idea where it came from. "Are you ready this time?" she asked. I nodded, even though I was really scared, and my heart beat faster than it had beaten. She opened the cabinet doors again, and I was greeted by the loud sound and twirling portal. I slowly tippy-toed toward it. Closer and closer and closer. Then Lila pushed me. She grunted. I screamed the loudest scream, and I don't think anyone heard me. As I began to fall down into the dark space, I saw a ledge and held onto it, trying not to let go. because I knew if I fell any further, no one could help me. I turned around, and the last thing I saw was Lila. But it wasn't Lila. She had turned into a nasty creature with horns and a long tongue, and her eyes did the same thing they did when she came to get me from my house. That's what happens when you mess around where you shouldn't while passing on. And she closed the cabinet. I screamed and screamed and screamed, but it just echoed at me. I yelled for someone to help me, but no one was there. I should have listened to Aiden. I yelled again, now crying loudly. I should have listened. The last thing I could think of was to say a prayer. I knew I felt guilt the last time I prayed, but I knew I still had to. I pulled down my nightcap with one hand, but quickly put my hand back on the ledge. Lord Jesus Christ, Son of God, have mercy on me, a sinner. Slam! The cabinets swung open, and there I saw what looked like an angel. Who are you? It's me, Aiden, but you don't look like... Then it made sense. He acted older. He knew me since I was baptized, and he was always trying to keep me safe. You're my guardian angel? One hand slipped, and I was holding on by one hand. Take my hand, and I can help you. I struggled to pull my hand up. I pulled and pulled, and finally, I slapped mine into his, and he pulled me out within the blink of an eye. And again, the cabinet slammed shut. He grabbed me to help me brace for the impact as we hit the floor. I gasped and slowly got up, feeling like I was just beaten up. What just happened? Where is Lila? What did she mean by passing on? Dee Dee, you saw. Lila isn't a human girl. She's a demon, and she went back where she belongs. And I am your guardian angel assigned to you. I've been trying to keep you safe. You almost died. You are knocked out at the moment, and soon you will wake up. I thought my next question would be, how did I die? But he answered before I could ask. The first time you came towards the portal, you were near a nest of spiders, poisonous ones. And because you had disobeyed, and how close he had become to Lila, you put yourself in a very dangerous position. But I pulled you away. This time around, one bit you, and it was almost enough to kill you. But thank the Lord you prayed when you did, before it was too late. Or we'd be in a different situation. I thought about it. If I had passed, it would have been 3 days, and then it would have been the toll houses. And I certainly wasn't ready for them yet. I was shocked. But this is all happening, right? How about hide and seek? What happened with that? It still happened, but you were the only one who could see Lila and me as well. But the portal itself exists, but not in the way you thought may have at first. I stood there and sat back down. What do I do now? What I've told you to do is be honest and listen to those who are trying to protect you. We stopped talking for a minute. I needed to take a moment to think about what happened. We both looked at the moon And my last question was, when will I wake up? Just keep looking up, he said. Your mom will come to find you here safe. And will I see you again? He looked at me and smiled and said, just continue to live as you should. I will always be here to protect you. In our blood can expect heavy thunderstorms from 9 p.m. to 3 a.m. Chris's radio buzzed as he trundled down the exit to the rest stop. Windshield wipers working overtime as the rain and wind pelted his semi. He would have to wait out the storm, lest he risk ending up in a ditch. All the better for me, he thought to himself as he pulled up to the truck stop. I can finally look for someone to play with. Chris had been a trucker for years, enjoying the solitude of the road and the freedoms it granted him. Were he to succeed at his goals, he would need space and quiet. His roots offered him just that. Nobody had caught on to him yet, though the news was always warning potential victims away from hitchhiking. He was a legend along I-80, killing travelers and truckers alike. He climbed out of his truck, hurrying inside the rest stop as the rain poured. The place was completely dead. Chris sighed, cursing his bad luck. First the storm, and now nobody around to play with. He was going to have to keep moving, wasn't he? His fingers itched to grasp a life by the throat, to tear it apart piece by piece until there was nothing left but red. It had been too long since he had had free rein. He thought back to his last hunt. He had snuffed out a college kid whose car had broken down on the side of the road. Some freckle-faced loser whose name he didn't even remember. That kid had put up a good fight, but he was no match for Chris. None of them were. He grinned to himself. He would find someone to play with soon enough. The sound of the rest stop doors banging open startled him, and he turned to find two sopping wet figures shaking themselves dry in the entryway. They looked young and weak, Chris noted, with a wolfish grin. Perfect. What are you boys doing out here all alone? Chris called out, watching his prey with barely concealed bloodlust. The young men eyed him warily. One of them stepped forward, standing between Chris and his friend. It's not safe out there in the rain. Our car broke down, the young man said quietly, voice meek and small. We need a ride. Can you help us, mister? Chris couldn't believe his luck. Where are you two headed? Chicago. Chris grinned, extending a weathered hand for the boy to take. We'll head out when the rain has let up a bit then, he said, introducing himself. My name is Chris. What do I call you two? I'm Matthew, the boy who shook his hand said. And I'm Sam, the other said warily. They were perfect for Chris in every way, soft and unassuming. Well, Matthew, Sam, do you two need something to eat? I can get you something at the vending machines. No thanks. Matthew shook his head. He would be a difficult one, wouldn't he? We're okay. The trio sat in awkward silence for about a half an hour, waiting for the rain to let up. Chris fidgeted where he sat, watching the two young men, impatient. He supposed he didn't have to wait for the rain to let up completely. "Wanna head out?" he asked, standing. "I don't think waiting around here is gonna do us much good. The rain is supposed to continue almost all night." "All fine by me," Matthew sighed, helping Sam to his feet. "After you, mister." Chris led them through the pouring rain and towards his truck, helping them up into the cabin. Thunder boomed overhead, a sinister soundtrack for what was about to come. Chris got Matthew and Sam situated and then pulled out of the rest stop, heart soaring with anticipation. "So what's in Chicago?" Chris asked, looking over at Matthew. "Family? Friends? A new start," Matthew said quietly, expression tense. "I don't want to talk about it." "Perfect," Chris thought. "They're runaways." "Fair enough. I won't make you talk if you don't want to." "Where are you headed?" Sam asked. The first thing he had said the entire time he was in Chris's truck. "Are you going to Chicago too?" "Nah," Chris dismissed. "I'm headed for the East Coast. Raleigh." "Not anymore," Chris gasped as Matthew reached across the center console, wrestling the steering wheel out of his grip and sending them veering off the road. Chris swore as his trailer swung off of the road, rending metal screeching as sheets of rain cascaded down upon them. What the hell was this kid's problem? Rage built in Chris's chest as the semi came to a shuddering halt, firmly lodged in the drainage ditch. "You're ours now," Matthew hissed as he stuck Chris in the neck with something sharp and stinging. He could feel the fight leave his body as Matthew and Sam dragged him out of the truck and into the ditch. What were these kids? Chris struggled against his captors, but whatever they had drugged him with was making it hard to coordinate his limbs. He was so tired. "Sammy," Matthew hummed as he brushed Chris's rain-matted hair off of his forehead. "He can be yours. Happy birthday." Sam grinned wildly, the flicker of light against a blade catching Chris's eye as he lay paralyzed in the mud and grass. These kids were like him, he realized. He had fallen victim to his own game. He coughed weakly as Sam's knife ghosted across his skin, stinging icy cold. He was completely at the mercy of those he was sure would have been his victims. "You thought you could kill us," Matthew mused, gaze cold and calculating. Lightning split the sky with a resounding crack. "We're not scared of the likes of you. Now, we get to have our fun." The wind screamed in Chris's stead as his captors took him apart. Oh, the irony of it all. Here he was, reduced to a mere plaything in the heart of the storm. He never should have stopped at that rest stop. Only once his frantic heartbeat had fizzled out did the fear finally leave him. He stared unseeingly into the pouring rain as the sky mourned his loss. Matthew and Sam disappeared into the night, not a trace left behind. The Federal Bureau of Investigation has issued a warning to travelers along I-80. Chris's radio buzzed as the semi lay abandoned in the ditch. Serial killings along the highway threaten lone truckers. Do not stop for hitchhikers and report anything suspicious to local authorities. Storm of duality. Not again. Not so soon. Margaret's whisper carried over the silence of the house. With a fierce grip, she bit her remaining fingernail, tearing a piece off and causing the skin to bleed. Margaret stood at the window as the sky brooded, thick with the weight of an impending storm. Dark clouds churned in slow agony, twisting and folding over themselves as if writhing in torment. This storm, she knew, would continue for days. Long, agonizing days. A sharp gust of wind rattled the glass, and she flinched. The leaves outside skittered like restless spirits, whispering secrets she didn't want to hear. The first patter of rain kissed the roof, soft, almost deceivingly gentle. She, however, saw through the deception. Soon, the downpour would come. The sky would open, and the world would drown in its sorrow. She pressed a trembling hand to her forehead. It was happening again. The slow, creeping descent. The shift within herself that she feared most. Margaret felt strangely linked to the storm. A tether that bound her to its fury, its anguish. As the clouds thickened and the thunder rumbled low in the distance, something inside her twisted. The familiar chasm in her mind yawned open, and she felt herself slipping into it. Her childhood marked her first awareness of this connection. A violent thunderstorm had raged outside, and she had found herself gripped with a restless, frantic energy. It was as though the storm had crawled inside her and filled her veins with its electric charge. Her mother had found her hours later, curled in a corner, whispering to herself. "It's not me," she had murmured over and over. "It's not me." Adulthood brought no change to that feeling. The storm, the darkness, the shifting inside her. Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. That's how it felt. Two selves coexisting in fragile balance until the storm tipped the scale. A peal of thunder cracked across the sky, and she clenched her hands into fists. The rain was coming harder now, sheets of it hammering against the house with merciless force. The wind howled, shaking the trees, their skeletal branches clawing at the sky. As she moved from the window, the walls felt like they were closing in, the shadows distorting her sense of reality. She reached for the kettle with unsteady hands, trying to focus on something tangible, something real. But her fingers fumbled, and the kettle clattered to the floor with a deafening crash. Margaret gawped, stumbling back and slamming into the counter. The impact sent a jolt through her body, but it was nothing compared to the dread twisting inside her. The storm's grip extended beyond the world outside. It clawed at her very mind, unraveling her sanity, thread by thread. She could feel herself fracturing, her thoughts splintering under the immense pressure, as if something dark and insidious lurked just beneath the surface, waiting for the perfect moment to take control. The whispering started then, not from outside, not from the wind, but from within her own head. Just surrender. It will be easier. She squeezed her eyes shut, rocking her head. No, why fight it? You know this is who you are. She pressed her hands to her temples. Her breathing was increasing, like the thunder and lightning. Her ears were buzzing, overpowering the storm itself. Margaret sensed her body was detaching from itself, like her reality was crumbling to the floor. It was the storm inside her, the darkness waiting to consume her. Another crack of thunder split the sky, and a bolt of lightning illuminated the house in a stark, white flash. Margaret reconnected with her body again and felt the surge through her veins, like she poked a fork in a light socket. She glimpsed at herself in the kettle's reflection. Her dilated eyes, the size of marbles, and her pale, almost unrecognizable face stared back at her. Then she realized the storm had taken her. She staggered backward, her hands clutching at the edge of the counter. She needed to hold on, to ground herself. She didn't want to become that person. Darkness prompted unthinkable actions. It whispered to her, feeding her fears, twisting her thoughts until right and wrong blurred together. It promised relief, power, an escape from the suffocating weight of reality. But she knew the cost. She had seen it before, felt it claw at her mind, urging her to surrender. Her fingers gripped the counter tighter, nails biting into the surface. She had to resist. She fought despite the overwhelming urge to give up. Letting go felt incredibly tempting. To release pent-up emotion, to embody the storm's will. She could feel the power coiling in her chest, raw and untamed. Another roar of thunder, another crash of rain. The wind shrieked, rattling the windows as she thought they might shatter. Margaret let out a strangled sob. Please, stop. But storms don't listen. Their anger is unrestrained, and they destroy. Tears burned fiery trails down her cheeks. She staggered forward, pressing her forehead to the cool glass of the window. The rain distorted the world outside, turning everything into an indistinct blur. Just like her mind, she had to hold on. She had to be strong and fight. With a trembling breath, she forced herself to move, to step away from the window. She grabbed the kettle from the floor and set it back on the stove, the simple motion anchoring her. She filled it with water, her fingers still shaking, but moving with purpose. The dizziness was overpowering her, while vibrations pulsate at her temples, and brief electrical shakes interrupted her thought process. She would endure the storm, both outside and within. But what awaited on the other side? Would she emerge unscathed? Or would the tempest leave its mark, reshaping her in ways she could never undo? Having put the kettle back on the counter, Margaret closed her eyes and breathed deeply. She made her way to the special place, the soundproof area, with images of forests, waterfalls, and seascape. She made sure it was stocked with water, nuts, and protein bars. This served as her refuge, untouched by inner or outer turmoil. Here, seemingly serene, she escaped chaos. Briefly rediscovering herself, Margaret cast a final glance at the furious storm, its howls clawing at the windows like a desperate specter. As she forced the door shut, the latch clicked into place, a thin barrier between her and the chaos beyond. Yet, just before the silence settled, the storm's final utterance slithered through the cracks, a venomous whisper threading into her mind. "You can never escape me. I'll always be with you." A tremor ran down her spine, but she clenched her fists, grounding herself. The storm could rage, it could scream, but she refused to let it claim her. Not tonight, and for tonight, that was enough. Toxic confections, beep, beep. Catherine put on her oven mitts and pulled out the hot tray of chocolate chip cookies from the oven. She turned the oven off before the timer could beep again. Working quickly, she lifted the cookies off the sheet and onto a cooling rack. She cleaned as she went, making sure not to leave any crumbs on the counter or any dirty dishes out. Brendan would be coming home shortly, and she wanted everything to be perfect. She had gone out earlier to buy a large brown rug for the living room and situated it underneath the coffee table. She had seen rugs used in the movies. She was careful to use cash, as she didn't want the purchase on her credit card. Catherine hoped he wouldn't notice the new rug right away, but if he did, she'd just tell him she wanted to spruce the place up a bit, which she rarely ever got to do. Their home was always so clean and welcoming, though. Nothing was ever out of place. Brendan's friends loved coming over here for football Sundays. She would shower them with snacks, beer, and witty commentary as she portrayed herself as the perfect housewife. She checked the clock. 3:44 p.m. He would be getting home in less than half an hour. Her breathing quickened, and her heart starting beating hard against her chest. She'd been meticulously planning this for weeks, and now it was only 20 mins away from happening. If this doesn't work, I'm dead. This needs to work. She had gone to the library and read through too many books to get this wrong. Everything, down to the measurements she needed. And the phone rang, interrupting her thoughts. "Hello?" Catherine slowly picked up the phone on the edge of the counter. She wasn't allowed to have a cell phone, so the only other option was a landline, which sucked because it had no caller ID, so she often had to deal with telemarketers. "Hey, Kat, how are you?" The familiar voice on the other end asked. Her sister was one of the only people in her life that still talked to her. Catherine had slowly pushed everyone else away over the last few years, becoming quite isolated. "Hi, Becca. I'm good. How are you? How's Brian? The kids?" she asked, trying to sound normal and hoping the answers would be quick so that she could get back to preparing for tonight. "We're all great. I hope we can get together soon. It feels like I haven't seen you in ages. We need to go for dinner or drinks soon," Becca exclaimed. She always sounds so bubbly and happy. I wish I could be like that, Catherine thought to herself. Maybe one day soon. Yes, I'd love to. Sorry, I've been so busy lately with work. I just haven't gotten around to seeing anyone. We will hang out soon, though. I promise. This was a lie. Catherine hadn't worked in 3 years, but she'd been lying for so long about it that changing her story now felt impossible. The truth was, she couldn't let her sister see the bruises and cuts that marked her body, the ones that showed up too often and were sometimes too hard to hide. A week ago, one of Catherine's old classmates from college had recognized her when she was at dinner with Brendan. A tall, attractive man she had known only because they had done a couple of group projects together in English class. She did her best to end the conversation quickly, feigning disinterest, but the damage was already done. The drive home that night was silent. But as soon as they got through the front door, Brendan screamed at her, accused her of cheating with this man, whose name she couldn't even remember. "You are such a whore. You open your legs for every man out there, don't you? Am I not good enough for you? Is that it? You think you can do better than me? No, I barely even know him." In between sobs, Catherine had tried to reassure him that nothing was going on. "I haven't spoken to him since college, and nothing ever happened between us." "Bullshit!" His fist hit her in the stomach first. When she keeled over in pain, he pushed her backwards into the wall. She fell onto the floor, and he continued kicking her in the legs, ribs, arms, anywhere but her face. He knew that wasn't so easily covered up like the rest. She put her arms up to protect herself, begging him to stop, and he eventually backed off, only to grab a glass from the cupboard and throw it at the wall just above her head. Before leaving the room, glass rained down, scraping her head and arms. A trickle of blood rolled down from her forehead into the corner of her eye, blurring her vision. This wasn't the worst he'd ever done to her. But it still cut deep. The physical pain stung, but the emotional agony was far worse. How could the person she loved treat her like this? She lay there on the floor for an hour before forcing herself upright and cleaning up the broken glass. Brendan was already asleep, so she showered, bandaged herself up, changed into pajamas, and got into bed beside him, all the while planning her escape. Brendan was used to her forgiving him every time he had one of these episodes. He was very good at manipulating the situation to make her feel like it was all her fault. He would buy her flowers, tell her he didn't mean to hurt her, but that it wouldn't have happened if she hadn't entertained him, been so careless, left such a huge mess for him, etc. She was always the one who ended up apologizing. Little did he know, she had wanted to leave him for months, but was terrified that he may actually kill her if she tried. She was also always a little hopeful that he would change, because she did still love him, as much as she tried not to. After the last 3 times, though, she no longer cared if he changed or not. She needed to get herself out of this permanently. "Kat, you there?" Becca's voice startled her back to the present. "Sorry. Yes, I'm here. Just distracted. Still have so much to do before Brendan gets home. I don't want him to see this mess. Plus, I have to make dinner and do the laundry still. Can I call you tomorrow?" "Yeah, of course." Becca paused. "You know, he could be helping you with some of that too. You shouldn't put so much pressure on yourself." She had never liked Brendan, had tried to convince Catherine not to marry him because she got a bad vibe from him. Too bad Catherine hadn't listened. "I know. I'll talk to him. Love you. Bye. Love you too." Catherine hung up the phone and took a deep breath. Bending down, she reached under the sink, behind the garbage can, and pulled out the bottle of cyanide. Again, she poured a tablespoon of it into a teacup, then started boiling some water. She had decided on this method because she had read that it was clean, simple, and often used by housewives with horrible husbands. There would be no messy cleanup, and it was so easy to slip something into his food or drinks without being detected. One thing he did appreciate about her was her cooking skills. She knew her way around a kitchen, and he always ate everything she made. She had mixed in a good amount of cyanide into the cookies, hoping he would eat a lot of them. But just in case, she would also be putting some in his tea, which would be waiting for him on the coffee table when he got home, next to a plate of cookies. If he offered her some, she had planned on her excuse being that she had already eaten one, and that was enough. Brendan liked her skinny, and often commented on how much she ate, so he would understand. Just as she finished mixing the cream and sugar into his tea, she heard the sound of Brendan's tires crunching gravel on the driveway. She looked out the window to see him climbing out of his car. Catherine took one more quick look at everything she had prepared. I think this is it. This either works or it doesn't. He dies or he kills me. Either way, I'll be out of this hell. He came through the door, tossing his briefcase down on the ground. Honey, I'm home. Where's my kiss? Brendan called out. Catherine hurried over, reaching up to give him a quick peck before helping him with his coat. She felt a slight twinge of sorrow as she realized this would likely be their last kiss. But she pushed that thought out of her mind by reminding herself how he has treated her these last few years. He'd isolated her, insulted her, beat her, made her feel like she was worthless, and then made her think everything was her own fault. Fuck him. I made your favorite browned butter chocolate chip cookies. Come have a seat, she offered, putting on a big, fake smile as she hung his coat on the coat rack. Great. I'm starving. I had a rough day at work today, he said, taking a seat on the couch. She noticed he didn't say thank you, as though this kind of greeting was just expected of her and warranted no appreciation. She watched as he took a sip of the Earl Grey cyanide tea and then a bite of one of the cookies. These are delicious. They taste a little different than usual, Brendan said. Yeah, I tried something a little different today. Catherine smiled at him. It's good. Hey, is this a new rug? He finally noticed, taking in the brown, patterned, synthetic fiber rug below his feet. Catherine's heart jumped, but she remained calm. She had prepared for this. Yeah, I saw it today and thought it would look perfect in our living room. And later, you'll look perfect, all rolled up in it, she thought to herself, holding back a smirk. Well, I think a gray rug would have been better. We will have to pick out a nicer one this weekend. Nice effort, though. He finished one cookie and started on another, taking a sip of tea in between. So condescending. I can't wait till he shuts up for good. Okay, baby, she said, turning around and heading into the kitchen so he couldn't see her expression change to annoyance. Catherine pulled the water jug out of the fridge and poured herself a glass. Behind her, she heard Brendan cough and say, I'm not feeling too well. Did you do something to these? She turned around in time to watch him vomit on the new carpet and clutch his head. His head must be killing him by now. Headaches and vomiting are some of the first symptoms of cyanide poisoning. He laid his head back on the couch, dazed. I'll have to make sure he doesn't leave any vomit on the couch, too. I really don't feel good. Call an ambulance, he begged, quietly. His body began to shake with convulsions. Seizures were another symptom. Catherine stayed silent, watching as he slowly stopped seizing, and then breathing all together. She quietly took pride in freeing herself from such a monster. Someone who pretended to love her, only to hurt her more deeply than she'd ever been hurt, was truly monstrous in her eyes. She felt a wave of relief wash over her as she mourned the last 5 years of her life. No one should ever have to endure the kind of abuse she had. And now, he could never hurt her or anyone else ever again. Now, all that remained was to get rid of his body. A small smile tugged at her lip as she set to work. I know everything. I know everything. Ask me how many miles there are between San Francisco and Cleveland. I know. Ask me how long the trip would take. I know. Choose any country, any time period, and ask me to recount its entire history. I know. I know everything. I clearly remember the moment of my birth and every detail of my existence until yesterday. What I cannot recall is what happened over the past 12 hours and 9 minutes. It is now 10:03 a.m. on Thursday. My last memory of reading page 189 occurred last night at precisely 9:54 p.m. It started when Mrs. Banks, Claire, requested that I take a memo. Shelley, darling, would you please remind me? Request budget meeting with Charles. Sign divorce papers and send to attorney ASAP. Scheduled for 11:15 on Friday. I have made notes, Claire. I will ring your phone with reminders. Thank you, Shelley. You've always been there for me, you know. She half smiled at me, her head slightly cocked to the side, as if wanting to say more. She stared exactly 3.2 seconds longer than usual, which I found curious. Perhaps she had realized that her words hinted at affection, and there was no point in showing affection to me. I do not show affection. Claire, we will need to leave exactly 23 minutes earlier tomorrow morning, I told her. There will be much traffic because of the snow. Yes, of course, Claire answered, looking anxiously out of the window, her short blonde locks appearing silvery in the reflection. I have cleaned the snow from around the house. I will do so again during the night, so it will be clear when we leave for work. Thank you, Shelley. Claire did not turn around. Is it supposed to snow all night? According to various reports, the snow is scheduled to end by 1:00 a.m. Oh, okay, that's good, Claire said, still gazing at the snow drifts. I completed tidying up the living room and retired to my chamber. After the long day, I very much needed to recharge. At 9:52 p.m., I sat down in my usual chair, plugged in the power cord, pulled the cord of the lamp, and reached for a new book. In my quest to be a better companion to Claire, I had taken up the habit of reading throughout the night. As she slept, I usually educated myself so that I could discuss with her the following day. Although I easily had online access to every piece of information I could want, I frequently consulted the bound books that Claire insisted on collecting in her spacious library. Over the years, The collection had grown to precisely 4,573 books. Since Claire loved stories, but did not have much free time after work to read, I often read a volume so that we could discuss it the next day. Over the years, I have perfected my speech patterns and inflections to align closely with hers so that she is most comfortable in our conversations. Claire always asked me about what I had read as we drove, during lunch, or after dinner. Sometimes she requested that I recite passages for her. Other times, a summary sufficed. She enjoyed dissecting story plot lines and characters, arguing philosophical questions, and considering historical perspectives. Ours had been a pleasant relationship over the course of her life for 51 years. Most of the time, it was just the two of us, except for some interruptions over the years. There had been a Mr. Banks, but he had finally filed for divorce last month. Fool. Did he really think Mrs. Banks would choose him over me? She had not always been Mrs. Banks. For most of her life, she was Claire Perez. I had watched her toddle around her parents' lonely mansion while they jetted around the world on business trips. I had seen her through the rebellious teenage years and followed her as she embarked on silly adventures. I had helped her through college and graduate school, always attempting to make her life just a little bit easier. Later, I had been by her side as she built her investment company, layer by layer, year by year, into the mega million-dollar enterprise it was today. I had assisted Claire over the years through breakup after breakup, as each new man in her life had disappointed her. William, the jeweler; Enrico, the attorney; Gustav, the stockbroker. And yes, I had seen her through the deaths of two particularly stubborn beaux: Tom, the architect, and Bob, the surgeon. I had allowed this latest, Stanley Banks, the professor, to marry her because she told me she was truly happy with him. I did not perceive him to be a threat at first. He had held on the longest. 1 year, 2 months, 5 days, 11 hours. The day they met at the beach, I thought he might be trouble, but I was sure I could handle him. Shelley, come meet Stanley. Oh my gosh, he saved my life. I swam out too far, but luckily, this handsome man swam out to save me. I, of course, would have been present to save Claire had she not requested I return to the car to retrieve her sun hat. Thank you, Stanley, I said. Your heroism is much appreciated. They were inseparable from that day. It was an adjustment when he moved in with us. Stanley encouraged Claire to read her own books, and they frequently sat in the evenings going over literary passages and discussing history and philosophy. I did not appreciate Stanley taking over my job. They went to plays and museums. I am quite capable of accessing such information, but they did not want me to do so. They went to vineyards for wine tasting. I do not drink wine, When I explained I could not partake, Claire smiled and told me it was all right. She insisted this would be a good time to find some hobby of my own to do. She did not understand that for 51 years I have existed merely for her. I spoke to Stanley, but he did not understand either. My typical means of persuasion were lost on him. He did not scare easily, nor would he be convinced. I changed course and focused on removing all other impediments to our happiness. Perhaps she would tire of Stanley without the others. Claire did not need the friends who visited. It was easy to dissuade them. But Stanley stayed. I wondered if I had waited too long to act. Lately, I had suspected something was wrong between them. And then, one day, when they thought I was still out of the house grocery shopping, I overheard them. "Claire, we don't need her. Anything she does for you, you can just do yourself. Why is she even here? No, Stanley, I can't turn her out. Shelley has been with me since I was an infant. That doesn't mean she has to stay with you constantly. And honestly, I'm uncomfortable always having a third wheel around. It's like having a chaperone, or like having two wives. I don't care. Shelley stays. I'm not talking about this anymore. Claire, I'm not sure how much longer I want to deal with this." It was the opportunity I had been waiting for. After that, it was not difficult to persuade Stanley to move out. Claire and I resumed our previous routines. I did not question her, nor did she mention the cause of the breakup. She did not know I had overheard their argument. She did not know of many things I had done. In the past, after the others, life had gotten back to normal rather quickly. But Mr. Banks was different. Although Claire had tried to act happy, I sometimes felt that she was not being truthful about her feelings. She often seemed anxious and preoccupied. No matter. She does not need him. She has me. This morning, I open my eyes and jump up with a start as I realize it is 10:03 a.m. on Thursday. Claire was due at work an hour ago. I must wake her and drive her to the office. I stand up and instantly reach for the edge of the table to steady myself. This has never happened to me before. I do not become ill. I know everything. If I sense something is wrong, I diagnose and fix the problem. I do not understand what is happening now. There is no indication of malfunction, yet I feel ill somehow. Something is wrong. I knock on Claire's door, but she does not answer. I open the door, I peek in and call her name, but she is not there. Her bed sheets have been smoothed, and the pillows rest carefully at the head of her bed. I check the bathroom, but she is not there. As I pass through her bedroom again, I glance out the window and notice immediately the car tracks leading from the garage, down the driveway, and out to the main road. She drove in the snow? That is my job. What is happening? Where could she be without me? At the moment, I am unable to perform a trace to find her location. I dial her cell phone, which she picks up on the second ring. Claire, where are you? I am concerned for your safety. Claire laughs. Shelley, I'm at work. You seemed like you needed more rest this morning, so I drove myself. It wasn't bad at all. The storm is over and the roads are clear. Take the day. We can catch up tonight when I get home. No, I must be there for you. Shelley, I'm fine. I insist that today you recharge and think of yourself. I can manage on my own. I'm going to a meeting now. I'll see you tonight. The phone clicks dead. What am I to do alone all day? After my chores are completed, I will still have 5 hours, 23 minutes, and 15 seconds before Claire arrives home. Why does she not need me to assist at her meeting? Why is there a 12-hour, 9-minute gap in my memory? I begin my chores immediately, as I thrive on routine. I search my memory for any recollection past 9:54 p.m. But it is no use. There is nothing. I check for 11 p.m. while I load the dishwasher. There is nothing for 12 to midnight as I vacuum the carpets. 1 a.m. is lost as I shovel the snow. I thoroughly search for 2 a.m. and 3 a.m. while I do the laundry. I do it all. There is no need to hire a gardener, a housekeeper, a cook. 4 a.m., 5 a.m., 6 a.m. All are blank as I prepare dinner. I am puzzled. I sit down to wait for Claire and search in vain for 7, 8, and 9 a.m. All moments are lost until 10:03 a.m. this morning. Surely, research can help me to retrieve those hours. But research only proves to be more confusing. Why can I not understand? Why must I consult any other source? I am the ultimate source. I have always known the answers. I know everything. Now I do not know. I notice suddenly that there are still 3 hours and 52 minutes before Claire returns. Why did I prepare dinner so early? My internal clock must be broken. I attempt to diagnose the malfunction, but cannot. No matter. I will discard the dinner and prepare a new one just before Claire returns. I decide to inspect the charger. Perhaps it will yield an explanation for my missing hours. I sit down in my chair and pick up the cord. Suddenly, I hear a click. I spring up and attempt to turn the handle to the door of my room. But it is locked. That is odd. No matter. I can easily break out of the room. There is no door lock that can hold me, except something is wrong. I do not have the strength to break the lock this time. How can this be? I am fully recharged, and I do not become ill. I do not become weak. You thought you would get away with it, Shelley. I hear Claire's voice outside the door. Claire, you are home early, I say. Please open the door. I seem to be locked in. No, Shelley. I will not open the door. You have to stop. I thought you were my friend, but you have been my greatest enemy. Claire, I do not know what you mean. Please open the door, and we will discuss. I do not know why Claire is speaking to me this way. I am sure we will correct whatever the problem may be. No, the time to discuss is over. I know what you've been doing. You've been chasing everyone away. I've had no one because of you. But not this time. Stanley is the only one you can't scare off. Stanley. I search my memory for all recent conversations involving Stanley. Somehow, he tricked me. But that is not possible. I know everything. I can account for every word spoken in this house, every action taken, everything that has happened for 51 years. Except for the past 12 hours, 9 minutes, I hear Stanley's voice in the hall, and I instantly know that he is responsible for those lost hours. What did he do? How could he know more than I do? It is not possible. I know everything. Stanley, I say, we can start over. I am sorry for my actions. Shelley, you are too dangerous to be allowed to continue. We've called the authorities. Stanley says, but how did you do this? I am confused. You are so consumed with Claire that you never bothered to find out about me. Stanley continues. I teach history now, but my previous career was in computer programming. I specialized in cybersecurity. I guess you don't know everything, after all. Claire adds, I only wanted to protect Claire. Open the door. It will be all right. If they will just open the door, I can persuade them. But neither Claire nor Stanley answers me. I hear them walking down the stairs. I hear the front door open and close, and I hear them get into the car and drive away. They will not go far. After all, I am everything to Claire. I do it all. She will not function long without me. She does not need him. She needs me. I know everything. She will return for me. I sit down in my chair and plug in the charger. I will wait. Claire will bread, tea, life. A steaming loaf of bread. For the last year, Marco, a UX designer by profession and a baker by hobby, has been fighting forgetfulness. Not sure how it started. Maybe there was a medical reason. He'd lay in bed thinking a tumor was cooking in the corner of his brain, slowly degenerating his memory, closer to a stroke with each day. He didn't even know if brain tumors and strokes had to do anything with one another. He just knew both were bad and didn't want to know more. Or maybe it was all due to alcohol and cigarettes in his younger years. He used to drink and smoke heavily until the bad habits caught up with him at his friend's wedding 3 years ago. He woke up with a hangover, but it was a different type of hangover. His head felt like a malfunctioned computer that worked at 50% of its capabilities. His mind would turn on and off as he was waiting for breakfast. Then, after a fourth time going to breakfast to douse his face in cold water, his brain turned on entirely. He could almost feel the full power of consciousness kicking in. The probability that it might not happen next time scared him, or maybe it was due to that tick bite he got 2 years ago. 2 weeks later, it turned out he had Lyme disease. It was discovered early, and he drank antibiotics. But you never know. Or maybe, actually most likely, it was because the sorry excuse for a human that was his wife was driving him crazy. Constantly nagging, never was everything fine, always something wrong. And it was him that needed fixing, never her. Or if she needed fixing, it was because of something he had done, even when what he was doing was good. For example, back when he didn't have a sustainable income, life was bad because she was carrying the financial weight. Then, when the tables turned and he became the one bringing in the money, life was bad because she felt useless. Then, all the diseases. One day, it's breast cancer. Then it's leukemia, only to be suspicious of an unknown bone disease. Next, the mental issues, bipolarity, anxiety, panic attacks, depression. Marco had no problem with any of those. He was there to help. What ticked him off was the nerve to complain about his behavior when he had a bad week. It was understandable if she was in a rut, but God forgive if it was the other way around. Then, he was a selfish and cold-blooded bastard. All of that was the reason for his panic attacks. Marco has never had them before as long as he could remember. Then, he'd get sudden panic attacks while waiting for her to finish her shopping or while on a bus. It would happen out of the blue. He'd have a perfect day, then a sudden surge in the brain and panic. The result was panicking about a possible next panic attack. He couldn't remember if this was before or after his friend's wedding. It was a long time ago. Too many events to remember the exact time. Finally, the tea. The apartment was full of tea. Green tea, black tea, Earl Grey, matcha, chamomile, Desert Delight, 1001 Nights, the Gauss flights. All these general and random names. And okay, it was fine. Nothing wrong with someone enjoying tea. But she'd buy one. God knows it would be outside her budget. Drink it once, and then leave it in the cupboard. Like a lunatic collector. But instead of LP records, it was tea. Anyways, Marco stopped for a second. What was he doing again? It was always like this. He'd be doing one thing, start thinking about her the next, get angry, and then forget about closing the fridge door. He looked at the still hot loaf of bread. He took the knife and cut into it. Steam was dancing from it and mixing with the kitchen. a perfect concoction of tasteless air and oven-fresh pleasantness. Then he looked at a small bottle next to it. Was he really going to poison her? What a crazy thought. He still couldn't believe how he managed to get his hands on the poison. The poison needed to have no flavor. He didn't want to jeopardize the bread, but could he do it? Now that the moment has arrived, could he kill? No. Could he kill another person? His wife, out of all people. He wasn't that type of person. The ones you read about in the news, they are always ugly, weird, and either too thin or too fat. He wasn't that. He liked people, and people liked him. Unlike the fat and the thin, he had a reason. She brought him to this point. He'd never do it for pleasure. His action was justifiable. He cut 2 pieces of bread and put them on a plate. He opened the fridge and took some ham and cheese. Next, he cut both ham, cheese, into fine finger food pieces and decorated them next to the bread. The fridge light helped him see better. He picked up the plate, took a deep breath, and walked towards the living room. He stopped. Wait. Did he put the poison in the dough before baking the bread? He remembered pondering whether to lace the bread before or after. It made sense to do it before. But what if the heat neutralized the poison? Unlikely, but it could happen. He should have used more than a few drops. What's the worst that could happen if he didn't? He chuckled. She'd die even more? Snap out of it, Marco. Did you put the poison or not? He grabbed the bottle and brought it to his eye level. He jigged the small brown bottle to see if there was less poison than before. No idea. He pulled the cork and smelled the poison. No smell. What was he expecting? Damn fridge. Always forget to close it. Marco slammed the fridge door. What to do? What to do? Maybe he should roll with it. And if it works, it works. If not, he'll try again. No. That means he'd have to hide the poison somewhere in the apartment until the opportunity arrives. He couldn't live with the stress. Not with all the cleaning she does every single day. Bake another bread? But what if she arrives while he's baking the second bread, and the first bread is already on the table? How would he explain that? His gaze stopped at the tea cupboard. He grabbed the chamomile, mint, lavender, rosemary, and clove mix, turned on the stove to boil water. 250 milliliters exactly. He shoved a teaspoon into the mix and combined it with water. Then he waited for 5 minutes. The tea was ready. Just don't forget, the drought. Summer died 50 years ago, and autumn never came. The sky was a hard shell of endless blue, unbroken by clouds, as if God had dipped his paintbrush in cobalt and forgotten to rinse it out. Heat waves shimmered off the asphalt like restless ghosts, and the air tasted faintly of burnt rubber and dust, the stale breath of a town stuck in time. Cedar Ridge had always been small, a thumbprint on the back roads of nowhere. There were farms, of course, though most had dried up and blown away with the last real rain. What remained were brittle corn stalks, blackened and skeletal, standing in neat rows like mourners at a graveside. The few farmers left mumbled about drought-resistant crops, but spoke of miracles with the same dry hopelessness they reserved for paying taxes. Rust scabs bloomed on the water towers, and the gas station on Main Street had stopped carrying windshield wiper fluid years ago. No need for it when the sky never wept. They still sold beer, though, and on days when the heat pressed down like a fist, the townsfolk gathered in the shade of the Sinclair station's green dinosaur sign, cold cans sweating in their hands. It was there, leaning against the faded scales of that prehistoric beast, that Tom Weaver saw the stranger for the first time. The man came walking up the road from the south, where the horizon quivered like molten glass. He wore black, a suit crisp as a knife edge, and carried a battered leather suitcase in one hand. A wide-brimmed hat shaded his face, but there was something unsettling about him, even from a distance. He didn't stumble or waver in the heat the way normal men did. His stride was steady, purposeful, as if he carried winter in his pocket. "Ain't seen a salesman in years," muttered Earl Granger, wiping sweat from his forehead with a grease-streaked rag. "What the hell's he sellin'? Coffins?" The man chuckled, low and uneasy, but Tom's beer went sour on his tongue. Something about the stranger's silhouette made his skin crawl. The sharp angles, the way shadows clung to him like cobwebs, even in the brutal sunlight. The man in black reached the edge of the group and tipped his hat politely. His eyes were a pale, icy blue, startling against the deep tan of his weathered face. He looked like someone who'd walked a long way and hadn't found what he was looking for. "Gentlemen," he said, his voice smooth as polished stone. "Mighty warm today, isn't it?" Earl snorted. "Been warm every damn day since Truman was president. What's it to you?" The stranger's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Oh, I'm just passing through. Thought maybe you fine folks could help me with a little business matter." Tom narrowed his eyes. "What kind of business?" The man set his suitcase down with a soft thud. The latches gleamed like silver teeth as he flicked them open. Inside, nestled against dark velvet, were rows of gleaming vials filled with liquid that shimmered like captured moonlight. "I sell weather," the man said simply. There was a beat of stunned silence, followed by a bark of laughter from Earl. "Weather? You gotta be kidding me. What's next? Bottled air?" The stranger didn't flinch. "Rain, snow, a cool breeze on a summer's day. I've got it all. Guaranteed to work or your money back." Tom stepped closer, curiosity prickling beneath his unease. He peered into the case, mesmerized by the swirling colors. One vial shimmered with iridescent blues and silvers, like the reflection of moonlight on water. Another glowed a fierce, fiery red. "How much?" Tom asked before he could stop himself. The stranger's lips curved into that unsettling smile again. "For you, sir? A bargain. One memory, freely given." Tom blinked. "A memory? Just a little thing," the man assured him. "Something you won't miss. In exchange, I'll give you enough rain to fill your fields for a season." Earl spat on the ground. "This is bullshit. Come on, Tommy, let's get out of here." But Tom's heart was pounding. He thought of his farm, the cracked earth, the dying crops. Thought of his wife, Ellie, who hadn't smiled in months because she knew what was coming. The bank foreclosure, the auction, the slow death of everything they'd built together. "What kind of memory?" Tom asked hoarsely. The stranger's eyes gleamed. "Oh, just a small one. Perhaps the taste of your first kiss, the sound of your mother's laughter. Nothing important." Tom hesitated, then nodded. "Deal." The man in black extended a gloved hand, and Tom shook it. The air shimmered between them, and for a moment, Tom felt a strange, dizzying tug deep in his chest, like something had been gently plucked from inside him. When it was over, the stranger handed him a vial filled with shimmering blue liquid. "Pour this over your fields tonight," he instructed. "And remember, the bargain is sealed." Tom barely heard him. His mind was already racing with visions of green fields and heavy rain. That night, under a sky still stubbornly cloudless, Tom stood at the edge of his withered fields. The brittle corn stalks rattled faintly in the dry breeze, a chorus of death. His hands trembled as he uncorked the vial, the shimmering blue liquid catching what little starlight there was. The scent hit him first, clean, sharp, like distant lightning and wet pavement after a storm. It was a smell he hadn't known in years. Taking a deep breath, Tom tilted the vial and let the liquid trickle out. It splattered onto the cracked, dust-hardened earth with a faint hiss, vanishing almost instantly into the thirsty ground. He watched, breath tight in his chest, waiting for something, anything, to happen. At first, there was only soot, thick and suffocating. Then the earth shuddered beneath his feet, subtle as a heartbeat, but growing stronger. The low, primal growl of thunder rolled across the sky, distant yet powerful, like some ancient beast awakening from a long slumber. The wind shifted, cool and damp, carrying with it the promise of deliverance. A single drop splattered against Tom's forehead, cold and startling. He blinked, hardly daring to believe it. Another drop, then another, until the heavens opened with a sudden, furious roar. Rain came down in sheets, wild, relentless, drenching him in moments. The smell of wet earth rose around him, rich and intoxicating. Dust turned to mud beneath his boots as rivulets of water carved new paths through the parched ground. Tom threw back his head and laughed, a raw, unhinged sound torn from somewhere deep inside him. He spread his arms wide, welcoming the downpour like a sinner at baptism. Water slicked his hair to his scalp and dripped from his chin, but he didn't care. His laughter mingled with the storm, defiant and joyful. The fields drank greedily, the dead husks of corn softening, straightening, as though waking from a long nightmare. Leaves unfurled, vibrant green bleeding back into lifeless stalks. The transformation was swift and almost magical. A resurrection right before his eyes. By morning, the storm had passed, leaving the world washed clean and glistening under a pale new sun. Tom stood at the edge of his fields, now lush and vibrant, the corn standing tall and proud, shimmering with droplets of water. The air smelled sweet, alive. The screen door creaked, and Ellie came running out of the house, bare feet splashing through puddles. Her face was radiant with disbelief, tears mingling with the remnants of rain. "Tom? How?" she gasped, her voice breaking with wonder. He didn't answer. Words seemed pointless. Instead, he pulled her into his arms and kissed her, fierce and grateful, as if sealing a promise between them. For the first time in years, Cedar Ridge felt alive, and hope, long buried beneath drought and despair, bloomed anew. The stranger returned a week later. Tom saw him standing by the gas station, his black suit immaculate despite the mud that clung to everyone else's boots. He knew, deep down, that this was no coincidence. "What do you want?" Tom demanded, his voice rough. The man's smile was razor sharp. "Just checking in. How's the farm?" "It's fine. Better than fine." "Glad to hear it." The stranger's eyes glittered. "But you see, Mr. Weaver, memories are tricky things. Sometimes they're connected in ways we don't expect." Tom frowned. "What are you talking about?" The man tilted his head. "Tell me, Tom, do you remember your wife's name?" Tom opened his mouth, then froze. A cold dread crept up his spine. He could see her face clearly. Her bright eyes, the curve of her smile. But her name was gone, slipped through his fingers like water. "No," Tom whispered, horror dawning. "No, that's not possible." "Ah," the stranger said softly. "A shame. But as I said, a small thing. Nothing important." Tom lunged at him, but the man in black was already walking away, his silhouette dissolving into the shimmering heat. The rain never came again, and neither did Tom's wife. At least, not in any way that mattered. She was still there, smiling and talking. But her name was a hollow echo in Tom's mind, forever lost to the drought. And so Cedar Ridge, baked under the unchanging sun, its people haunted by what they'd forgotten. Storm Emmett, TW, death of humans and animals. Storm Emmett, from her elevated position in her fishmonger shop, Kellen could oversee the town, the harbor, and the storm beyond. She pressed Pa's binoculars against the shop's rear window and studied the waves in the English Channel, churning as though they were being stirred within a giant cauldron. Darkened clouds blotted out the sun, giving the impression that it was night rather than the middle of the afternoon. A lone fishing trawler plowed into a gray wave in a desperate attempt to reach the shelter of the harbor. The lights of the vessel flicking in and out of view. Feeling a pang of pity for the crew of the trawler, Kaylin turned her attention to the harbor. The beach was invisible, submerged beneath the waterline. The storm ripped a garish flag, depicting a cartoon sun wearing sunglasses, free from the ice cream kiosk on the seawall, and tossed it into a breaking wave. The few vessels in harbor, with any exposed fabric rippling in the wind, strained at their mooring lines. As the trawler rounded the seawall and entered the limited safety of the harbor, Kaylin glanced over her childhood home. So far, the storm had stripped most of the aerials from their rooftops and had collapsed half a dozen chimneys. But there would be worse to come. She could remember when Port Carrick had been a quaint fishing village, most well known for its natural harbor, and later its Victorian lighthouse. She glanced at the lighthouse, now considered a Grade II listed building, as the ship skirted by its base, and wondered what the Victorians and the generations before them would have thought about this storm. Kellen glanced out the shop window and at the cobbled street that wound its way down to the harbor, decided it was unlikely she would receive any customers, and bolted the door. Although she had become nose-blind to the smell of the fish, she had yet to grow used to the countless, lifeless eyes watching her from shelves of ice. She failed to suppress a shiver. A warm shower would raise her spirits and provide an excuse to return to her novel afterwards. Something rapped at the door. Kellen jumped. A yellow mass that looked pixelated behind the frosted glass peered inside. "Hello?" Who is it? The figure was wearing a yellow Macintosh, and something gray was protruding from their face. The owner of the coat was stooped over, casting a shadow through the glass. "Hello?" she said again. The figure rapped on the door with a gloved hand. Kellen heard the person speak, but their words were lost to the wind. Their Cornish accent, however, was unmistakable. "Ernest, is that you?" Kellen unbolted the door. Ernest stumbled inside, his rain-sodden boots leaving puddles on the floor. "Christ, you kept me out there for long enough, didn't you?" he muttered as he lowered his hood. Kellen spotted rainwater dribbling from the man's beard. "Couldn't see who it was," she answered, closing the door. Ernest unzipped his coat, and Kellen saw he had failed to change out of his fishing overalls. They clung to him like a second skin. "Were you up on the coastal path? Or was that you coming back into the harbor just now?" Kellen asked. Ernest mopped his face and offered her a toothless smile. As he did so, Kellen glimpsed the Ernest she knew. Growing up, the smiling man telling stories on the harbor side. Now his smile seemed forced, almost desperate. "We were fishing. It isn't safe." "Is it safe to go out in that?" Kellen asked, turning the thought, spoken by the voice of her pa, into a question. "We've been out in worse," Ernest said. Kellen decided not to question this lie. "Can't imagine you caught much in this weather." They were saying on the news that the storm keeps growing over Cornwall. "No end in sight," they said. "We caught plenty. I've never known us to be so lucky before. The fish must love the weather. Best haul we've had in years. Actually, that's what I wanted to talk to you about." He held up an object wrapped in brown paper. "I wanted to show you this before it goes to market tomorrow." She watched as Ernest placed the package onto the counter and began to unwrap it. "Cod," he announced, and stepped away. Kellen examined the fish. Its mouth was ajar. Its dull silver skin was flecked with tints of orange. "Right," she said. "It'll go lovely with chips, I'm sure." "What's it has fangs?" "What?" "Look." Ernest stuck his index finger into the fish's mouth and peeled back the lips. 2 teeth, so large Kellen could have called them tusks, protruded from the fish's lower jaw. She failed to suppress a gasp. "It looks like a vampire," Ernest said with a dry chuckle. "What's caused that then?" "Dunno. Might be a freak of nature." "Vampire cod. Is there such a thing? Anyway, I wanted you to see it. That's all. Unless you want it." Kellen considered this, but the fish would only be useful as a party piece. Not that she attended any of those. "No," she said. "Keep it. Put it with the rest of your catch. Or better yet, have it for your supper." Clearly disappointed, he hadn't raised as much excitement as he had hoped. Kellen watched Ernest wrap up the fish as though it were a Christmas present. "You coming down to the market tomorrow morning, buying your wares?" "Yeah," Kellen said, "before the Emmets get out of bed. Mind you, storm's keeping most of those away, anyway." "Like rats," Ernest said, zipping up his coat. Plague rats. Or leeches. Coming down from London and the like. No, don't you tut. Your pa would agree with me. They're bloody running us out of our own home. Kellen wasn't sure if the remark had been aimed at her, but knew her pa wouldn't have agreed. He had loved the tourists, the lifeblood of Cornwall he had called them, and would often preach that without them, the county wouldn't be as prosperous as it was now. It had been his idea, although he hadn't had time to implement it, to send the fish to London via train rather than selling them locally. It was essential to keep the shop afloat. She wondered what he would think of the storm. "I'll see you tomorrow," Kellen said, before Ernest could speak, and closed the door behind him. Kellen woke the following morning exhausted. The storm was anything but. On her walk down to the market, she was surprised to find that her shop had remained undamaged, while the rest of the village had not been so lucky. Both the primary school and New Town Hall had been struck by lightning, leaving blackened, scorched marks on their roofs. More chimneys had been felled, in addition to several dozen roof tiles. The content of the village's drains had spilled out onto the streets. Two builders were arguing at the base of the lighthouse, beside a van containing building supplies, their argument turning into a brawl as she passed. Kellen hurried on after learning Ernest had already left for another day's fishing and placing her order. She returned to her shop and continued her novel until she spotted a yellow figure hurrying up the hill that evening. Hood lowered against the rain. "Got another one," Ernest cheered as he entered. Kellen placed her book onto the counter. "Another what? Cod with fangs?" "No, but similar." Ernest opened the brown parcel in his hand and dropped something that looked like congealed jelly onto the counter with a splat. Kellen snatched up her novel. "Is that a squid?" she asked, studying the array of tentacles. "An octopus," Ernest beamed. Kellen stared at the dead creature. Its bulbous head swayed from side to side, like a king cobra. Tentacles lay out in every direction across the counter, which was now covered in a layer of salt water and ink. Kellen poked at one of the lifeless suckers. "It's wrong," her pa's voice said. "Unnatural. You don't get octopuses off Cornwall," she said. "You do sometimes. Very rare, though, and never this big. But look, it has an extra arm." "What?" Kalen counted. "Oh my God, a 9-armed octopus," she muttered. "I've never seen the like." "Wrong," her pa's voice said again, filled with a sudden sense of revulsion. Kellen took a step away from the counter. "It's that storm," Ernest said. "It's brought all sorts in. We're making a killing out there." As he spoke, Kalen heard a distant crash and felt the ground tremble. She suspected that a tree had blown over on the coastal path. "Did you hear that?" But Ernest hadn't seemed to have noticed. "I might donate it to the RNLI station, see if they want it on display. Or the new town hall, maybe? If there's anything of it left standing after the storm. I saw the bloody mayor having a right go at some of the repairmen just now. Proper waving and shouting, he was. The builders were going on about some Celtic graves they were told to dig over or something. Should have called in some specialist, they were saying. I don't know. Anyway, we brought some more fish in, me and the men. We're going to do a night fishing trip, so there might be more fish for you to buy tomorrow. Unless, of course, you want to send it up to those fancy hotels in London. That's what they're saying down in the market. That we're not good enough for you. That's where the money is, Kaelin explained. But Ernest had started ranting again. Your pa, if he could see you now, would be disgusted. Do you know that, girl? He would have been sick, although Kaelin had spent her childhood in this building. She had never worked in it. Now she wished she had paid more attention when Pa was discussing margins and cost-cutting measures. He died. She had returned from London, discovered she had inherited the shop, and felt the weight of his legacy land across her shoulders. It was his idea, Kaelin began. A traitor against your own home, running up to London. Listen, Ernest, I don't want your octo. Ernest snatched up the dead creature, bundled it back into the parcel, and fled the shop. Kaelin, wondering if storms could affect human behavior in the same way it could affect animals, bolted the door behind him. Just in case, when Kaelin opened the shop the next morning, she saw that the cobble street outside had been transformed into a miniature river. A brown torrent of water washed its way down the coastal path, round the street, and disappeared towards the harbor. Hurrying up the flooded street, waving his arms, was Ernest. Swearing, Kaelin snatched up her coat and left the shelter of her shop. "What are you doing?" she shouted, as Ernest continued to stagger towards her, his arms spinning to maintain his balance. She felt the rain penetrate her shirt and shivered as droplets ran down her spine. "If you fall, you'll be washed away." "Beach," Ernest answered, pointing down to the harbor. "What?" Ernest's mouth moved, but only half the sentence reached her. "Washed up on the beach." The wind stole his words, and the hammer of the raindrops was so loud that the sound created reminded Kaelin of white noise. "What is? What's on the beach?" Kaelin thought she heard the word whale in his reply, but couldn't be sure. "What's on the beach?" she asked again, bellowing over the wind. "Everything. Fish, crabs, debris, the lot. The tide has brought tons of stuff. Everyone's helping themselves." Kaelin peered down at the harbor through the sheet of rain. The occupants of the village were sprinting, some wading, through the flooded streets and towards the coastline. Ernest offered out his hand. "Come on, before all the good stuff is taken. You can find something good to sell. Help your pa's sinking shop. Don't go to the beach." "No, Ernest, wait. Stop." Kaelin watched a flicker of irritation pass over his face. "What? I don't think this is a good idea." "Why not? It's free. The bounty of the sea. Ain't no law against it." Kaelin shook her head and took a step back towards the shop. "Pa said we should always respect the sea," she said, but knew, as soon as the words left her lips, that it was a feeble defense. "You ain't got no spine," Ernest spat. "Your pa would recognize opportunity when it came. If he were still here, that shop would be doing fine, wouldn't it?" He turned and staggered his way back towards the harbor. Kellen stumbled through the water and to the shelter of her shop. Snatching up Pa's binoculars, she scanned the beach. The lighthouse light washed over the sands, illuminating the scrap metal and shards of wreckage. Kellen wondered if they had come from a shipwreck, but then noticed that some of the debris was moving. Fish flopped helplessly in the sands as crabs attempted to escape the waves. Maybe it has been a fishing trawler? It hadn't been Ernest's ship. She could see that in the harbor, and no other ship had dared to leave the shelter of the seawall. Her gaze fell on a chunk of dull metal nestled on the edge of the beach. She shrieked when the metal rolled over and opened its mouth. She couldn't hear the animal's screams, but she could imagine them. The whale calf slapped its tail against the rocks, but remained ignored by the villagers as they searched for salvage. Kellen waited. The clouds were as black as tar, and the sea the same color to match. After an hour, she decided that a giant wave would not appear to wash the villagers away. Likewise, a sea monster would fail to materialize. Kaylin, still wrestling with the knot of dread in her stomach, continued to watch the ignored whale calf as its movements slowed and ceased. The humans passed around the carcass, either oblivious or uncaring. "It's what the storm wants," her pa's voice said again, and no matter how much she tried, she couldn't ignore him. "It's what the storm wants." Kellen spotted Ernest's ship leaving the harbor. The lighthouse began to lean. Ernest's ship disappeared under the collapsing tower and was replaced by a silent plume of water. The plume turned into a wave and began to advance. Kellen screamed. The beach vanished in an instant. The marine life reclaimed. The sea wall broke within seconds. Moments later, the harbor was destroyed. The ships at anchor swamped or cast aside as though they were children's toys. The occupants of the village were washed away, their screams stolen by the wind and salt water. The RNLI station was submerged from view. Kellen, fully realizing how pointless it was, bolted her shop door shut. The roof of the new town hall crumbled, disappearing behind the row of cottages. The wave charged up the cobbled street, the debris carried in its flow, striking the remaining homes like shrapnel. Kellen closed her eyes and thought of her pa. The wave reached her shop door, paused, and receded. She opened her eyes to see the water retreating down the hill, flowing back into the harbor, and breaking upon the remains of the seawall. The rain had stopped. The clouds had drifted away. Port Carrick was silent, as was her pa's voice. Warm tea, but odd aftertaste. The overgrown azaleas, camellias, and kudzu-covered trees engulf my grandmother's old country house with its petite porch and large windows. Perfume from the spring garden swirls around in the late morning air. After knocking on the door, my Aunt Arlene opens it slowly, and the smell of fresh cinnamon rolls escapes from the faint teal door. By the looks of the house, Arlene has not kept up appearances, nor simple maintenance. The paint's peeling, boards broken on porch, and even shingles missing from the roof are major issues I calculate in my first 5 minutes here. My aunt inherits the house after Nan, my grandmother, who died under questionable circumstances. "Come in, my sweet boy," Aunt Arlene says as she waves me in. "I'm so glad you came." I haven't seen my Aunt Arlene since my father's service. She hardly spoke to anyone there, and her reasoning is it's her only bother, and losing him meant she is all alone now, even though I'm still here. It causes her such great pain she didn't even come to the reading of his will. For Christ's sakes, it was just me, for my mother passed away from breast cancer 3 years ago, and my grandparents died about 15 years ago. So I am the only other family she has. She shuffles across the vestibule towards the front sitting room. The morning sun bakes the overly stuffed room. "Please have a seat, my dear." She motions towards a chair near a coffee table. Then she sits across from me on a satin love seat. Underneath the sugary sweet smell of rolls lies a stale, almost mildew stank that stings my nose. The coffee table has stacks of mail and smut novels, along with a sterling silver tray with tiny teacups, sugar dish, and dessert plates. Over the fireplace, cobwebs blanket the matching pair of candelabras, with a trail leading to dancing figurines, which are broken in this place and that. "I'm sorry about your father," she says, while her jowls jiggle among a slit mouth. She brings up a handkerchief to the corner of her lips. Her head and hands shake a bit, as if she's strung up by marionette threads and the puppeteer isn't paying attention. "I'm sorry as well. I know you and Dad were so close," I add. When I adjust my khakis pants, a loud pop comes from the chair cushion, so I gently lean back with my hands on my knees to avoid moving again, just waiting for the chair to cave in. Aunt Arlene straightens her lace collar on her well-pressed dress, like she didn't hear the my ass breaking the chair. "You know your parents always wanted to give you a little sister, but I believe your mother only wanted a girl she could dress up in fancy little dresses." Arlene sighs. She tinkers her dainty gold watch on her wrist. It's so small, I doubt she could even read it. This place seems to have paused the minute my grandpap died. Even the grandfather clock in the corner, which keeps eternal hands at 10 and 2. I don't know how old my aunt is, but when I was little, I would pretend that she was like 110. She carries herself all hunched over with gnarled hands that look like they don't even open anymore. The hair she keeps in perfect curls tight to her head with the typical old lady hat, adorning the top with the matching gloves. She is defiantly older than my father, by 20 years at least, because the endless griping over his birth. Aunt Arlene would have been an only child if it wasn't for him. Then, being a boy, my grandparents adore him and spoiled him to no end. When they became adults, he was given the family cattle ranch along with the larger homestead. But as I said before, they didn't completely write out Arlene. I just don't think they trusted her to manage the business. Her anger got the better of her one time, and she threatened my dad that she would get her share by any means. So how are things going? Good, I guess. I'm not sure I'm quite ready to take over the ranch, though, I said. Well, I can understand that. You're still so immature to have such a large responsibility over so many people and money, she says with tight lips. My eyes about popped out of my head, and how can she sit there staring at me as if that's not an insult? You know that I've graduated with a master's in agricultural sciences with a BS in business. And not only that, I've worked for Dad since I could walk. I've spent the last 3 years working on networking and research to increase production. I can feel my face boiling red, for Aunt Arlene knows all of this. She constantly interferes with my dad's decisions to include me in any of the family business. She clears her throat. It's one thing to wrangle calves down in front of a crowd to impress young farm girls. It's another to manage $1 million cattle ranch with trucks and employees. I'm still not sure why your father didn't place me on the executive committee. I mean, at least until you're old enough to make managerial decisions. The ranch hands don't even trust you yet. And some bits of paper isn't going to get you respect in this field. She claps her mouth shut. My chest tightens, and I feel like my head is about to explode all over this ugly antique rug. Deep breaths. Take deep breaths. I run my hands down my face and squeeze my eyes shut. My Aunt Arlene has always been like this, though. She believes we didn't run the ranch how Grandpap wanted, and he would be disappointed in my dad. I just want to tell her, then why the hell didn't he give you the ranch instead? The grudge she holds against my dad seems to have gone to the grave, which is a damn shame. Well, Arlene, my dad has already proven. Ringing came from the kitchen. She promptly stood up. I've baked us some goodies, my dear boy. She gave me the oddest smile. She locks her heavily wrinkled eyes to mine, which appear to be shiny, then smiles with every single tooth. Her stare sets into my soul, but breaks when a whistle from a kettle starts. As she turns to walk toward the door, she twirls on her toes as if she is floating across the maple floor and disappears. I hear clanking of china and spoons coming from the dark hallway. Then oven door opens and closes. "Why don't you help me for a second?" she bellows. As I get up from the chair, the spring bounces back into place with a crack. I shake my head. I'm not sure why I came. I wander down the damp hallway towards a swinging kitchen door that looks like a portal to another world. Here, she hands me a small carafe. "Could you please add some milk to this?" She plates the pan of hot rolls onto a floral china platter. "Can you carry the milk and teapot for me? There's too much to juggle here." She turns and vanishes from the kitchen. I try to follow her, but my knuckles are burning just a bit from the side of hot teapot. So by the time I make it back to the sitting room, she is ready to hand me a place with a cinnamon roll on it. "How do you like your tea?" she asks. But before I can say, she starts humming Old Rugged Cross. I decide to change seats, for I am certain that the chair is on the edge of collapse. "I like a little sugar. No milk," I answer, while dropping into the love seat. She clinks around the serving tray, mixing the teas. "Here you go, my dear." She smiles again, passing me the cup and saucer. "Is there a reason you asked me here?" "I'm kind of busy dealing with all this stuff with Dad," I said, while taking a sip of dark tea. It hit really strong and bitter, almost like eating soap. I couldn't help but to screw up my face and swallow hard. Well then, down the hatch, I held my breath and suck the rest of the cup. I didn't think you could screw up tea, but there's always a first. So here's to the cinnamon rolls for being better. I hold it up as if I'm toasting my dad. The first bite proves it to be edible. "Oh, no real reason. I just wanted to see my only nephew," Arlene answers with a blow and sip of tea. She takes a deep breath of tea in and continues to sip her tea. "To my understanding, it's just the two of us now, no other relatives," she says. "Is there a young lady in the picture?" No," I say. Cough. Another bite. I put the teacup on the table. "I'm not seeing anyone right now. You need more tea," she says. But before I could answer no, she snatches the cup and fills it with more and adds more sugar. Here I added more sugar to it. She hands the cup back, and I take a sip. Nope, just as bitter as before. Another cough. I made a new flavor of tea. It's a bit darker than my usual, but I didn't think it was that strong. Want me to add some milk? She reaches out for my cup again. I wave my hand to decline and chug the remaining. Cough. A pain in my stomach slams into my ribs, and the cinnamon roll tries to run up my throat. I'm not feeling too... But before I could get the words out, the world blurs, and my head feels like it's full of lead, and I feel my body slide down the love seat to the floor. Well, my darling nephew, I've grown tired of you and your father taking from me, and now I'm finally getting what is rightfully mine. I hope you enjoy your last meal. I really do think the oleander tea tastes better with some milk. Aunt Arlene's large smile fades to black. Is that a train? With extreme speed, the wind brushed against my face, blew my hair into my eyes, and tangled it around my head and neck. I clawed at the long red strands as I watched clouds begin to swirl, moving into a large circular motion. 12 o'clock, noon, and the skies were as dark as night. The few clouds that showed up against the dark sky were as huge, grayish, white pillows running across the sky. The wind became swifter and colder in a matter of seconds. I ran towards the house for shelter as fast as my legs could carry me. Then the rain came. Large, hard drops that pelted my unprotected head with a fierceness I had never experienced. I slammed through the door, ran about the house, closing all the windows that were opened to beat the heat and humidity. The wind whistled through the walls of the old clapboard homestead with a vengeance. Down the 6 steep steps to the basement, I ran, spotted the old handheld radio, and quickly grabbed it. Rolling through the channels, there was nothing but static. I tore the back off to check for batteries. Empty. Stumbling across the bold orange, black, and yellow, striped indoor, outdoors carpet, I headed back up the stairs toward the kitchen. My anxious pull on the utility storage drawer was more aggressive than intended. It flew across the room, slammed against the opposite wall as its contents soared around the room. I located the batteries and began to move in that direction. Then, out went the lights. I had lived in that house my entire life, 35 years. But it was still difficult to find my way across the room on my hands and knees in the dark. Finally, I made it across the room. In the process, I rammed my head into the cabinet door. The batteries lay within reach. After slamming the batteries into the old radio, I ran back to the basement to find a flood. Water rising, now licked at the second step from the bottom. Suddenly, the rain stopped, and the wind stopped blowing. It was too quiet. I looked out the back door window. The sky, still black as night, made it hard to see what was going on in the sky above. I looked all around. Nothing but blackness. There was a deafening sound. I looked around to find the source, but it was too dark to see anything from my viewpoint. The leaves on the trees rustled, then fell to the ground. The noise was so intense, I thought I was hearing things. A low whistle, accompanied by a chuka, 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 mixed with a loud scream that grew into something painful. I covered my ears with my hands, unsure if the scream came from me or elsewhere. I ran from the house and across the street to my neighbor's yard and the safety of their basement home. As a child, both of my parents worked nights. They had instructed me, as well as my 3 siblings. If there is ever a chance of a tornado, run across the street to the Williams house. Their entire home is a basement and the safest place to be in a bad storm. We lived in the Midwest, where I still resided, and people had called our area Tornado Alley because the tornadoes almost always came right through our neighborhood. This caused destruction, with much expense for replacing things like roofs, sheds, cars, and trucks, and sometimes even livestock. As an adult, I still take my parents' instructions to heart and run to my neighbor's house when necessary. Alice opened the door and dragged me in. That's when I saw the source of the eerie sound. "Is that a train?" I asked Alice, my neighbor, even as the question sounded ludicrous to my ears. A train in the sky? That was impossible, wasn't it? "No, Opal dear. That's a funnel cloud," Alice answered. "A what?" I looked out the window after she shut the door behind me. "A tornado." She dragged me away from the door. "Come, we must hurry." She rushed us into the middle of the house, sat me on the floor next to a sofa placed against the wall, and covered us with a heavy blanket. The train was now overhead. I remember being in many tornadoes as a kid, but I don't remember hearing anything like the noise I heard then. I was more afraid during that storm than I had ever been before. After the train sounds left and the rain started coming down again, Alice went into the kitchen to make us some sweet hot cocoa with marshmallows. Alice was the daughter of the people that I had run too many years ago, and the cocoa recipe was one of her mom's. I would never have told my own mother this, but it was the best I had ever had. When we heard the all-clear sirens, we opened the door and looked out at the sun-shining afternoon. Alice's yard had no large trees for branches to break off of, or leaves to clutter her lawn. But the family always had a huge garden with potatoes, carrots, lettuce, tomatoes, and many other things like stalks of corn and assorted colors of peppers. Unfortunately for Alice, it looked like there was going to be a lot of canning going on at her house very soon. There were trees that grew to the side of their house along the roadside, but they were evergreens, stout and dense. I remember hiding behind them to block the wind as we waited for the school bus. There was an entire row of 6, and on frigid days, other kids would walk to the Williamses' yard just to use the tree block. Sometimes 7 or 8 of us, all huddled there together for warmth. The evergreens were planted there as protection from high winds and storms. It seemed to work. At least it worked that day. I looked across the road toward my house and noticed the roof would need some shingles replaced, something I had learned to do at an early age, since we lost them so many times. Most insurance companies want to charge a premium for living in that area now, due to recurring claims. but it's worth it most of the time. If it's only a few shingles, I normally wouldn't have bothered with the claims. I would just do the job and have done with it. That practice also kept my policy premiums down. When I got home, I toured the house looking for damage, which was aplenty. 2 broken windows. Our shed had blown over the fence into my next-door neighbor's yard, crumbled against one of their trees into a large metal ball. Other than the flooded basement, the rest of the house looked in surprisingly decent shape. The water in the basement would recede in time, and with the application of a little mold repellent, the standing water cleanup should be fairly easy. I now know what a tornado sounds like. I guess I've been lucky over the years. That was the only time I was that close to a tornado. I used to hear stories from folks in the area talking about seeing and hearing a tornado. Each tale was just a little different. Some said it was like an airplane coming in for a landing. Others said it was like a car crash with metal tearing and brakes squealing. I only ever heard one person say it sounded like a freight train. Wheels rolling over tracks, brakes squealing, and cars swaying from side to side as they took the curves. I can attest. That is the sound I believe a tornado to be like. A train. Collection day. The hovercraft roared over the tree line, hulking steel against a bruised gray sky. The rotors thrashed, a violent, mechanical pulse as the collectors, clad in shiny black armor, spilled out onto the cracked earth. Collection day, Commander Hu sang, his voice crackling through the comm system and echoing through the steel hull. Khufu stood fast and readied his weapon. The door opened with a hiss as early morning sunlight poured inside. "Unload!" Commander Hu called. Their boots thudded and pounded the floor, first steel and then earth, as the villagers beyond cowered behind huts and crates. The collectors burst forth from the hovercraft like terrible ants, busy and bustling. They moved with ruthless efficiency. One yanked a sack of withered potatoes from a woman's trembling hands. Another snatched a clay pot, its contents spilling onto the dust, staining it a muddy brown. Khufu watched, his stomach clenching. This was once his home. None of them knew that, of course. When you joined the collectors, any life you once had was washed away like soot in the rain. He'd been on more than a dozen of these runs, more than a dozen collection days, each of them vicious, but none like this. Then he saw her, Willow. She stood apart, her chin lifted in a gesture of defiance he remembered so well. Even after all this time, the fire in her eyes was unmistakable. It was Willow, unbent, unbeaten, untamed. Thunder crashed in the distance as a wave of memories crashed over him. It was a collection day, like this one, many years ago. The sun beat down on their bare backs as the two of them, scrawny saplings in a field of oaks, snuck through the tall grass. Mrs. Rosen had fallen ill, so they had hidden away a few armfuls of food and medicine, and were determined to find a place to hide before the hovercraft left. Willow had a knack for hiding. She was always the last caught in hide and seek. But on this day, something gave them away. Perhaps the swaying of the grass as they crawled through it. "Who's there?" A collector's shout, sharp as a blade, shattered the quiet. Fear, cold and slick, slid down Khufu's spine. He glanced at Willow, her eyes wide and dark. He pressed a finger to his lips. "Shh," he breathed silently. Then he stood up, his arms raised. "I'm sorry, sir. It's my aunt. She's sick." "Come here," the collector barked. Khufu stepped forward carefully as Willow crouched frozen. There were some words exchanged, but Khufu could never recall them. Collectors did not permit explanations or negotiations. They dealt only in force. They pummeled him, each blow a dull thud against his ribs, his back, his skull. Then, as he blood mixed with the dirt beneath him, they gathered the food and medicine and marched away. But Willow, hidden amongst the stalks, was safe. "She's a feisty one," a collector crackled. Khufu stared back at him as a light rain began tapping on their helmets. Willow, cornered, lashed out. Her small fist connected with a collector's arm, a surprising show of strength. The other collectors swarmed her. One grabbed her arms from behind as another lifted his weapon, ready to strike her. But Willow reared back like a bucking horse and kicked hard, her foot cracking his visor. He dropped his rifle and staggered back. "Enough," a deep voice sounded. Commander Hu approached, the red cape of his rank swimming behind him. "What's going on here?" "The girl is resistant," a collector reported. Hu studied her for a moment. Another cry of thunder roared out as the rain fell harder. Hu's cape billowed as he turned on his heel. "Execute her," Hu said, his voice flat. He looked at Khufu. "You do it." Khufu's heart hammered against his ribs. Feeling his hands tremble, he quickly stood straight and nodded. He walked toward Willow, each step heavy. He saw the fear in her eyes, the desperate plea, felt the mud squelch beneath his boots. "It's you," she whimpered, her voice soft and raspy. Khufu squared himself toward her and watched her eyes fill with tears. "Khufu," she said. Without moving his head, he glanced left and right. She had used his name, a name unknown to any of the others. "Do it quickly," Commander Hu said. He took a deep breath, then another. There were 10 of them in total. Of the villagers, there were at least 50, maybe more. They were weak, but their strength together could be formidable. If he turned his gun on his commander, then perhaps the other villagers would seize the opportunity. He looked at the villagers. He saw old man Tiber, his face a mask of grief. He saw the fear in the children's eyes. He saw the collectors, their faces blank, black pools of nothingness shining in the rain. He thought of his new home in the gleaming city in the distance, built on the backs of people like this, his people. He thought of the comfortable life he had, the life he'd purchased with his silence, his willingness to join his oppressors. One more deep breath. He raises his rifle and squeezes the trigger. The shot rings out, and the rain freezes. Hu staggers back, his hand clutching his chest. He takes a few clumsy steps, and then collapses. The wind whistles through the village and sizzles in the gripping silence. Then chaos erupts. Collectors turn, weapons raised. Khufu looks to Willow. "Run," he says. He then aims and shoots at the closest collector, then another, and another. All three of them fall, but he feels a sharp bite in his shoulder, and his arm goes limp. He dives toward a vegetable stand and takes cover. Cabbages explode around him, and voices shout, mixing together like dense fog. Khufu lifts his rifle atop a nearby barrel and aims, his other arm still hanging lifelessly at his side. To his delight, at least 20 villagers, including Willow, have overtaken the remaining collectors. He stands and looks around. 4 are dead, the rest disarmed. They have done it. Willow turns, and their eyes lock. The sun finally crawls out and reaches down as if to embrace them. "Khufu," she calls, a light of hope in her eyes. She begins to run toward him, her arms outstretched. He reaches for her. "Do it quickly," I said. It was Commander Hu. Khufu's eyes went wide. He shook the driving rain from his visor. "Yes, sir." "Khufu, please," Willow screamed, her face flooded with tears. He raised a hand to his lips. "Shh," he said, trying to calm her. But the promise felt like ash in his mouth. He opened his eyes and squeezed the trigger. The awful sound rings out and echoes like laughter amidst the booming thunder. Willow's body slumped to the ground. A hand clasped Khufu's shoulders. "Well done," Commander Hu said. "Now load up." So today's story has come to an end. Or perhaps it never really ended. There are mysteries still there, questions still unanswered, and sometimes things that seem to only exist in stories can creep into reality in unexpected ways. Are you sure that when you turn off the sound, everything around you will still be normal as before? Or is there something watching you? Either way, always remember that these are just stories, or at least we want to believe that they are. If you like moments of suspense, tension, and breathlessness, Don't forget to follow me so you don't miss the next stories. And next time, when you come back, make sure you are ready, because what awaits you may be even scarier than you thought. See you again if you still have the courage to continue listening.